Disclaimer: the content provided in this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. While we discuss topics related to mental health advice, life wisdom, and alike, the opinions expressed are personal views of the hosts and do not constitute professional, legal, or medical advice. We make no representations or warranties about the accuracy or completeness of the information discussed. Any action you take based on the information in this podcast is strictly at your own risk, and we are not liable for any losses or damages in connection with its use. Additionally, this podcast may contain discussions around addictions, substances, which are intended for adult audiences. We do not endorse any illegal activities. Please consult your local laws before engaging in any actions related to this content. By listening to this podcast, you agree that you are over the age of 18 or the age of majority in your jurisdiction and understand the terms of this disclaimer.
Welcome to the Balancing Forces podcast, where two opposites collide in the best way possible. One brings the fire,
the other keeps it chill.
But together we share life's lessons, hard-earned wisdom,
advice you can actually use.
Whether you need a fresh perspective or just a laugh, we're here to elevate your mind. So buckle up, because things are about to get real and
really funny.
Chapter 18, Your Addiction to Busyness and the 3 Steps of the Spiritual Life. I have spent the entirety of my adult life on my own spiritual journey since I was 19 and left the U.S. Air Force Academy after 2 years as a cadet. I loved the military, loved playing Division I football, loved the challenge of the high-level academics, athletics, flying, and military responsibilities, and loved being surrounded by the best and the brightest. And I was good at it. I was on the superintendent's list for military and academic excellence, was PQ or pilot qualified, had gone through sailplane training, earned my wings, and soloed in a plane with no engine, which is terrifying, acrobatic, and exhilarating. I had made it through sophomore year cuts on the Academy's Division I football team, which had beaten the Texas Longhorns in a bowl game and ended my frosh year ranked 5 in the country, which meant I was on the team as an O lineman for my final 2 years. I had every reason to stay, on top of the fact that it was gorgeous Colorado and I was drawing a great paycheck as a proud member of the U.S. military. But somewhere in that second year, I knew it was time for me to leave. I didn't know why, only that it was time to go. And as I said, my performance was fine, but despite the success, my enthusiasm dropped off when I began to feel a pull away from the academy. I had no idea why or what was going on inside of me. I just felt this pull, and my attitude began to sour. There I was getting killed, and an honors macroeconomics class I had no business being in was not a cause for my dampened enthusiasm, but as a result of my decreased interest in being there. Normally, I'd power through a class I hated, basically forcing myself to do well, but this time was different. The whole situation was different. I kept telling people, I don't know why I'm leaving, only that it's time to go. I had no idea what was going on with me. I had fought and planned for years to get into the academy. I got into USA, FA, and the West Point. Play football, fly sailplanes, and then light aircraft, and eventually fighter jets. And here I was in the middle of it, doing it, kicking it in the ass, having already overcome the hardest parts, the first 2 years, and now I was leaving. It made no sense. Completely illogical, but I knew I had to do it. It was also a terrific blow to my ego, for I had bragged for years about all that I was going to accomplish in life. I was basically an arrogant dick in high school, yet here I was walking away from the monster opportunity. Incredibly dumb. It made no sense. The folly was only compounded when, upon leaving, I got accepted into the Ivy League business school, Cornell, which at the time was one of the top in the country, and the football program, and turned it down because I had just felt in my gut that I needed to return to Minnesota. It felt right, but it made no sense. I won't go into the subsequent boring details. The point is simply that I walked away from a colossus of a career opportunity and then a second one. And by age 19, I had said no to more opportunities than many people get in a lifetime. Back then, I also had no idea what it meant to be on the spiritual journey. Sure, I had grown up in the parsonage and our whole world was spiritually and religion. So I got it, but I hadn't truly experienced it. It was religious jargon. Again, knowing something and living it are two vastly different things. I knew religion, but I had never experienced the madness, the feel, and the intensity of spirituality, true relationship with one's own self and the spirit of the universe. And then came the chaos of knowing I had to leave the academy and everything I had planned. I knew these choices were a disappointment to some who were near to me. My closest brother at the time didn't talk to me for over a month when he had learned that I turned down the Ivy League business school, an opportunity he coveted and would have killed for when he was my age. Friends looked askance at this formerly cocky, big mouthed classmate with utter confusion and no small amount of schadenfreude. Prior to leaving, I pretty much knew all of that would happen. In the bonus track entitled The Greatest Fears in Life, I discussed the fear of the known, though the internal stuff was worse than the external stuff. The level of disorientation and utter absence of clarity were far greater than I imagined, for far longer. I had no one to guide me who had experienced such a thing or gone on such an adventure off the accepted paths in life. There was no map. The writings of Richard Bach, Schottky, Gawain, James Hillman, and Joseph Campbell would end up being very instructive, particularly in understanding what it meant to enter the dark forest of the spiritual journey, as I had just done. But I was on the journey alone, because I had no one to guide me. It would last in its most intense forms for the next 12 to 15 years. In retrospect, I would see that I was not only sorting out my own life, who I was and who I was to become, but was sorting out a map for those who would come after, so that they might have what I never had. I had to suffer pain and disorientation more than others, so I could eventually help others and have my wisdom and insights come from experience and not just a book. I had to learn and know the journey intimately every step of the way. Later, I endeavored what felt like the next call for my life, entering the path for ordained minister as a pastor. This would be a hilly, treacherous path and would come at a great price, both personally and professionally. Simultaneously, I was rather unwittingly building my spiritual counseling practice, writing books that yearned to come out, and wrestling with marital and family issues. All the while, I was simply trusting the calling of my own soul from one venture into the next. Yet, I was also continually coming under great heat from those closest to me and from professional overseers because my path was not clear and was not one of the tried and true paths that people often expect of those around them. Compound that with the voices of pressure from myself, as well as the drumbeat of society saying, succeed, 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 and I was really struggling. But eventually, it all began to fall into place. More importantly, I began to grow comfortable with uncertainty and strained paths I was being called to, such as being an NCAA head strength coach, living in my car for years, off and on, and as I wrote a few books, and much later giving away all of my life possessions to live on the streets, sleeping on concrete for 2.5 years to work with the homeless, destitute, and drug-addled with not a penny to my name. As the years and decades wore on, more and more people began to come to me for counsel, even while living on the streets tending to the homeless. I had police, military, high level academics, wealthy, influential, young, and beautiful finding me somehow, coming to me for insight, for help on their own journeys. I don't know why, but they came. I don't know how they found me, but they came. And as the years went on, I began to realize that mine would not be a normal path. Mine would be a path entirely of my own making, where there previously was no path, led only by the calling of the gods from the quiet of my soul. Market corrections. One of the things that happens on the spiritual journey is that we experience the calling from within or are jerked by life to make major or minor course adjustments. Things happen, whether externally or internally generated, to pull us off the path we've been on. It can feel like a coming apart or a loss or a state of bereavement or confusion, but even at its worst, it is always a movement towards something better if we allow it to go the course it must and do not resist. There is a similar phenomenon that happens in the financial sector. It's called a market correction. Investopedia defines it thusly: a reverse movement, usually negative, of at least 10% in a stock, bond, commodity, or index to adjust for overvaluation. Corrections are generally temporary price declines interrupting an uptrend in the market or asset. This defines well what happens on the spiritual journey or what pulls onto the spiritual journey of what I call living deliberately. Some people are pulled onto the spiritual journey by minor course corrections, only to feel later called to a major adjustment after they've built up confidence or after the pain of the existing path has gotten so bad as to motivate action. And as we've seen, never underestimate the power of pain to give strength to make a previously unwanted and avoided decision. However, in my case, the major market correction came first. It was a correction of 50% or more, or so it felt. Everything after that was a smaller correction or adjustment, like the coarse and fine adjustments on a microscope, if I may mix metaphors. I had the courage to defy the powerful voices in my life, and the universe knew that. So it gave me a hearty yank off the path that was not mine. The military and being a fighter pilot were simply not my calling, nor was going to a prestigious business school, nor were either of those to be longer stops on my journey. I was called to a path that there was no possible way I could have ever foreseen, and I experienced a reverse negative movement that was far more than 10%, that lasted for over a decade and exacted a mighty toll on my life, eventually giving way to a long, slow, wonderful uptrend. The time since that first major course correction has been spent whittling the off course ideas, paths, people, things, events, and beliefs. We discover who we are by discovering who we are not. To become you requires saying no to all that is not you, and that is infinitely more difficult than it sounds. It also requires doggone focus, because not yous are forever intruding on your life, distracting, attempting to pull you off course. This is the nature of the spiritual journey, constant market correction, some big, some small. Courage and the spiritual journey. What I have discovered over the last 30 years is that going down the spiritual journey and living in concert with your own inner voice and union with the spirit of the universe demands three fundamental ongoing steps. 1. Hearing the voice. 2. Heeding the voice. And 3. Letting go of trying to control the results. Or as I prefer to think of it, 1. Feel, 2. Attack, 3. Quit. This is the full summation of the spiritual journey, of the authentic, deliberate life. All of life is encapsulated in these three little steps. This is the roadmap I have found for finally allowing joy, peace, happiness, and clarity into your life. Everything good hinges upon your ability to feel, attack, and quit. And yet, for as simple as this little formula sounds, there is really nothing in life that could be more difficult than to create the solitude necessary to hear, the fire necessary to heed, and the open hand of trust necessary to quit or let go. The precursor to and the ongoing most important element of the spiritual life, the absolute sine qua non, is courage. Be it courage innate to your being, situational courage, courage that flows from the trust in the universe or God and or self, or courage born of pain. The spiritual journey is impossible without it. It absolutely requires courage to slow down when society says to keep pushing and driving, and allow yourself to hear your voice and feel all of the pain that accompanies it, all of the pain that you've been running from so long. It requires courage to stand up and speak your voice, living your truth, knowing there will be many trying to stop you, and it requires immense courage to let go of the call once you've invested so much of yourself into it and done all that you've inspired to do. Courage fuels the spiritual engine. Step 1. Feel. A very large percentage of my clientele is comprised of extremely successful, high functioning females. A great many of them, as well as those females who are not as success driven or are everyday moms or getting by each day, are simultaneously driven to simply not stop. That is, we've elevated busyness to the level of virtue in this country. Non-stop motion is seen by a great many women as some sort of badge of pride. Oh, I have to drop off one kid at soccer, then two at ballet. Then I have a dental appointment, two meetings at church, and a meeting with the realtor. And that's just by noon. And of course, it never stops from morning to night, from one day to the next, from 1 year to 10 more. Women in our society are just insanely busy. Somehow that is seen as a good thing. It is not. They are running. You are running. And not running to it. You are running from it. As mentioned earlier, the mad, Zoloft-driven busyness is the problem, not any sort of solution. You are running from the giant tidal waves of feelings inside of you that you fear will overwhelm you if you slow down. The neurotic pace of your life is quite deliberate, isn't it? You act like it's not your choice and out of your control, but the chaos is a choice, isn't it? It's intended to keep you a step ahead of having to think about all that you don't want to think about, not the least of which is how non deliberate and inauthentic your life is. For many, male or female, young and old, the hardest part of the spiritual journey is just starting it, slowing the heck down and allowing the wave to hit you. The hardest part is allowing yourself to feel again. That's why the antidepressants are so nice, right? Not that they really work, and there's plenty of suppressed research solidly indicating they're no better than placebos, but they seem to keep you from feeling. It's not just the constant motion that keeps you from feeling. It's the morning coffee, cigarettes, antidepressants, and God only knows what other meds. The action, the over exercising, the overeating, the overparenting and overworking, the Kendall Jackson or vodka at night and or the gambling, cheating, and every other manner of distraction. Anything to avoid the truth that your soul keeps trying to force upon into your consciousness so that you'll look at it, feel it, and let it pass through you, out of you, once and for all. The notions of stopping and solitude are terrifying. It's just too much to comprehend, not to mention actually do. You fear it will bore you or overwhelm you. And it will. It will knock you down, perhaps many times, but it will pass. Eventually, this too shall pass. All of it. But first, you have to go into it. The person who most runs from hearing the inner voice, who most runs from slowing down and listening, who most runs from feel rising up from the soul is the person who most craves security. It is the security of numbness, the security of pseudo happy feelings, the security of supposedly safe and secure life that keeps the person from going into their own soul and hearing their own voice. Why? Because they know already that their own soul is calling them to something a whole lot different than this miserable life that they're living. That desire for security is a powerful driver. It is rooted, of course, in the fear of insecurity, specifically the fear of change and the fear of what people will say if I do change. Here, in this miserable present reality, I am safe from criticism and ridicule, safe from the pain that I knew so well as a kid and since. And yet, that plunging into the self and that purging of the soul are precisely what is required to begin a relationship with your own true self. That is precisely what is required if you are to begin to live authentically, if you are to begin to unpack that box that contains the real you, the box you wrapped tightly with duct tape and packed away deep inside you decades ago. That is precisely what is required if you desire to finally have the peace in your soul and lasting happiness in your life. There is no two ways about it. Spiritual stuff ain't pretty. The longer you run from your pain, the longer you run from your happiness. In that vein, I am not a believer in this whole culture of incessant focus on gratitude, or more accurately, I am not a believer in the notion that gratitude for all the good things is a spiritual way. I believe in purging. I believe that the pain yearns to come out, and that no amount of happy thinking can paper over the pain lodged deep in your soul. It has to come out. Heck, I even include on my gratitude list every day all of the negative feelings I am feeling, from hate to anger, from pain to jealousy, and the full gamut. I picked up this tip in the book, Making Miracles in 40 Days. I believe in it as a great addition to the spiritual discipline of journaling because I am a great believer in the power of releasing negative energy stored in the body and in the soul, not to mention in the memory. So I am grateful for the pain, rage, fire, intensity, sorrow, and the like, for I know it always yields greater wisdom, depth, peace, and joy. In solitude and quiet is where we finally begin to hear our own voice. But what must happen first is all of the fears, negative and not you messages we've swallowed, and self-destructive core beliefs that have been pressed into us must be removed. They must be allowed to come up and out, precisely as your soul has been trying to do day in and day out all of your life. and it hurts coming out, just as those messages hurt going in when they were first inflicted on you. They hurt coming out, but come out they do, and there are mechanisms for getting them out quicker and somewhat painlessly. But once we begin to clear out the obstructions, our own voice begins to be heard quite clearly. It can finally rise up from within our viscera. There is no longer any blocking in its rise. The occlusions are gone. Once we remove what no longer feels good, we allow what does feel good to rise up. You begin to know what really feels good to you and what directions you really want to go with your life. Of course, this alone, this knowing, can be quite terrifying in and of itself. Articulating your truth, i.e., putting into words that which you really are, is a higher order of creating. Feeling the impulse of something new rising up from within us is one thing, but then dwelling on and feeling it further is the next step of creation. However, to go from merely ruminating on something to actually speaking it is a radically big step and a much higher and more powerful order of creation. This is why people are so terrified of putting thoughts into words. A certain measure of responsibility and ownership happens when we speak our truth, as opposed to just kicking it around inside. To speak something means to be held accountable for it, more often than not, and so most people wait for resolution to come in the head before ever giving words to a truth, an idea, or an impulse. Unfortunately, resolution often doesn't come in the head. But also, giving words to the pulse rising up from within usually means going against the wishes of all those people who want you to stay precisely the way you are and think precisely the way you always have. And of course, act the way that is predictable and quite convenient for them. And because the thought of crossing them is so scary in its own right, it is far easier to just keep running. It is far easier, it seems, to never put in the words, the calling of your own soul. It is better, it seems, to never express or let out your discontent, your frustration, hurt, and anger. It is seemingly easier to never even begin to even consider it all because you have fears of where it will lead. It takes so much more courage to just stop and actually begin to listen to the calling of your own soul. Few things in life are scarier than this. And this is what it means to live an intuitive, deliberate life. It is to begin to tune into your own intuition, your own sense of inner knowing. It is start to finish, a relationship with your own inner voice. In that place, we are fully fused to the message and guidance of the universe. And to live from that place of trusting one's own intuition and feelings is to unleash a power in your life that you have never known and simply cannot fathom prior to doing so. The fullness of the spiritual path and its many blessings demand your tuning into the voice of feel of your soul. If you are too scared of solitude, too afraid of no motion, unwilling to hear your own feelings, you are severely limiting the amount of joy possible in your life, if not eliminating it completely. Step 2. Attack. Once we feel the call, once we know the directions of our own soul is beckoning us to, once we've taken the time and space to listen and feel, once we hear our own truth rising up from within the very depths of our being, once we allow that truth to be known to ourselves, we are then confronted with the call to action. We're confronted with the monster decision to actually do it. And that comes with its own set of fears, because you know exactly how those around you will respond. You know exactly what your brother will say, exactly what your mom or your BFF will say, exactly what society will say. You know exactly the resistance you will face. You know exactly how hard your knees will be knocking and how hard your heart will be pounding. The movement from speaking your truth to acting on it is another mammoth step to a much higher order of creation. What keeps people from attacking life now with the voice of their own soul pulsing within them is the fear of what others will think. They fear criticism and how that new criticism will only tear off the scabs of the wound from when they were criticized as a kid, when they tried to be real and authentic. The source of all depression and anxiety, the greatest fear of all the people, the one thing that kills more dreams is the fear of what others will think and say. I am an absolute believer in this truth. What is really killing you right now, if you're really honest? If your fear of the voice is your fear of the voice and words, i.e., the disapproval and criticism of someone who has power over you, living or dead. But the call is there, pulsing over loudly inside, waiting for you to finally begin. The call of your own soul begs for action. At its core, whatever the specifics of the calling might be, the message rising up from your soul is a mighty no. It is a no to the life that you have been living, to the life and the belief systems you have had forced on you at a very young age. It is a fundamentally and a loud, resounding no to the belief that the real you doesn't matter. In that no is the bold declaration to life that I matter, damn it, I matter. Life begins at no. Until you finally believe in enough to act on it, no amount of anyone else believing in you will ever matter. Until you love who you really are, ain't nobody else gonna. The person who most runs from heeding the inner voice, who most runs from amping up and attacking the vision that has been put in their soul, who most runs from the acting on the inner voice, is the person who most craves approval. Sure, that's all of us. But for some people, the desire to be liked and approved of exceeds that desire but for some people, the desire to be liked and approved of exceeds that same desire in others. It is an extremely compelling motivator to inaction. This person will engage in every manner of overthinking as to clutter the mind deliberately, thereby undermining the call they know is there, and thereby not having to act. The overthinker wants the path that offends no one and steps on no one's toes. That path doesn't exist. The second step of the spiritual journey is to dive in. It is to attack with full vigor that which you know you have to do. And more accurately, it is to attack that which you know you most want to do, even though it scares the heck out of you. It is to attack that which you simply know your soul needs to do for itself. To live in full relationship with yourself and the spirit of the universe is to take action when called, and it is to do it more and more with less and less hesitation. It is to simply trust the call, not always knowing exactly where it will lead, and definitely not overthinking it. If it doesn't scare the bejeebers out of you, it isn't your path. It isn't your calling. It's someone else's. People don't go to amusement parks for the safe click, click, click of the up part of the roller coaster ride. They go for the insane ride down and around. If your life doesn't feel like the downside of a roller coaster, simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, you're living what someone else wants you to do. You are choosing safety, which is really the need for approval over authenticity. Step 3, quit. Really, the sketchiest and often most frustrating part of the spiritual journey is the quitting of one path for another, and for so many reasons. See, no call lasts forever. The call of your soul morphs in small and large ways as you go further down the road. Often we are called to open and pass through this door, not because the next room is one that we are to reside in, but because we must pass through that room, a stairway, two ante-rooms, a slide, and 3 time warps before we get to the door to the next room that we are to be in for a while, at least till the trap door opens in that room and lands us in something even better. But the capacity to quit is paramount in the ongoing spiritual life, for it is far too easy to get stuck in a past call when the universe or your own soul is making it abundantly clear that this relationship, this career path, this location, this habit, or what have you is simply no longer your calling and must be walked away from. Much spiritual sturm und drag in life is because someone is holding on to a path or relationship that once was the call but is no longer. For it is just doggone scary to leave one path when every last issue with the next one isn't resolved. It is even scarier to leave one path when you can't see the next path clearly or even in the distance. However, if you can't quit, you can't truly live. We are called in life to quit things, just as surely as we are called to start things. Creation is invariably preceded by destruction. Things must die for things to live. We are called to quit things on the micro level, on the day to day level, constantly. We are called to quit things on the macro level, Big dreams, established relationships, big ideas, beliefs, career paths, and so on, more often than people realize. For the spiritual journey requires fluidity and malleability, not rigidity and force. Vince Lombardi was wrong. Back when I was an NCAA head coach for strength for all sports at what happens to be one of the top wrestling schools in the country, and thus is simultaneously part of a city and area that produces a lot of MMA UFC fighters, I was often asked to speak to teams, coaching groups, campus groups, and auditoriums full of recruits and their parents. It was often in this last setting that I would reference one of the greatest mistakes by one of the greatest coaches in American history. I would begin by pulling out a $20 bill and offering up to the crowd of the parents and high school recruits this enticement. I'll give $20 to the first person who can shout out why this college is really here. Instantly, kids started shouting out things like to give us an education and to help us to get a degree. But as they were shouting, I would quietly fold up the $20 and announce that none of them were right. You'll get an education no matter where you go or what you do, and this school has a far higher purpose than getting you a degree or even giving you knowledge, I would tell them. Continuing, the real purpose of this school is to line up a buffet in front of you, this giant buffet of experiences, from studying organic chemistry to playing sports, from working at the homeless shelter to studying overseas, from playing wiffle ball with your friends on the weekend to going to church or synagogue, from writing papers to going to cultural events, from dating to learning Tai Chi, and on and on. And your job is to step up to that buffet and to quit as many things as possible. Pause. Silence. I had their attention now. I had used the one word athletes aren't supposed to speak and certainly aren't allowed to advocate. Your job, especially now at this age, is to step up to the buffet of life and try as many things and quit as many things as possible until you find those one or two or three things that you have no desire to quit, until you find that handful of things that I could pay you money to get you to quit and you still wouldn't quit. See, as athletes, we are taught that the great Lombardi maxim, winners never quit and quitters never win. Well, that's just garbage. Winners quit all the time. They quit training techniques for better ones, quit one sport for another, quit one career for another one that looks more interesting or enticing, quit friendships that no longer are life giving, quit places, persons, paths, and things that have become draining or debilitating. Winners are actually constantly quitting, forever refining what is their path and eliminating that which isn't their path. Vince Lombardi was wrong when he said winners never quit and quitters never win. Your job for the next 4 or 5 or 10 years is to throw that quote out the window and to quit as many things as possible until you give yourself permission to quit that which is not you. You will forever be engaged in a life that simply cannot make you happy. And the truth is, when we're on the path that really lights us up, we work harder, we work smarter, we are more diligent, and we are more committed. Every man must carefully examine which way his heart calls him, then pursue that path with all of his strength. Hasidic proverb. Or worse, you'll find yourself juggling all of those things that you started but have ceased to be fun. And now they're sucking the life out of you. Or worse still, you'll stop trying new things unless you're certain you can succeed at them. In other words, you'll start living in fear, in hesitation, and in an ever shrinking and supposedly safe life. If you don't give yourself permission to quit now, when you're young, you'll be 45 years old, like your parents are now, and you'll be knocking at the door of my counseling office because you realize how unhappy you are. And parents, your job is to give your children permission to stop and start, permission to quit, permission to not know what they're going to do with their lives. You need to stop asking your kid what their future plans are because that short circuits the process of discernment by putting so much pressure on the end result rather than finding the right fit. What's true in career choices of college kids is true in relationship with lovers and the relationship with your own self. Until you give yourself permission to quit the large, medium, and small things that are not you, you will forever be stuck in a life of things that are not you. And what do you think the odds are of you being happy when you're doing things and living a life that are not you? What do you think the odds are of you becoming happy when you're forever bleeding yourself of life energy, refusing to quit, and refusing to build a life of joy and aliveness? Great athletes, musicians, business people, and so forth quit many times. Positions and paths that aren't quite right, personal and professional relationships that don't work, and habits and disciplines that no longer bear fruit. In July of 1965, at the Newport Folk Festival, Bob Dylan, whom Rolling Stone magazine lists as the greatest rock artist of all time and whose signature sound is unequivocally linked to the acoustic guitar, plugged in and played an electric guitar, effectively quitting exclusive devotion to the acoustic guitar. All while a giant cultural cacophony raged against that change. He was dubbed a Judas by his fans and the folk music community, while simultaneously fusing it with the rock community. Michael Jordan quit baseball after earlier quitting basketball when he was still better than most players in the game. Jackson Pollock largely quit figurative representation, not to mention easel and a brush, when he stumbled upon splatter painting or paint pouring. Howard Schultz quit selling and marketing coffee makers when he stumbled upon the Italian coffee shop experience in Milan and realized that quality of coffee and the coffee shop experience were what was missing in the US. I've had some very accomplished professional gamblers as clients who stoutly attest that the hardest part of winning at their craft is laying down a hand, and the biggest mistake is forcing one when something is off or doesn't feel right. Wayne Gretzky, arguably the greatest hockey player of all time, quit playing when he was no longer at his prime, and also later quit coaching when he realized he wasn't nearly the coach that he was, the player. As a deliberate parent, one must constantly adjust and quit old parenting techniques and philosophies that aren't working. People constantly quit schools, jobs, relationships, diets, workout plans, life paths, and the like that just no longer feel right. Allowing one's call to rise up from within and then following that call absolutely require the courage to quit that which is not you. The third step in the daily and yearly spiritual deliberate living is really a master level step. It is the capacity to let go of trying to control the results. And this is the key, not to mention incredibly difficult. See, once we hear the calling of our soul and we see a vision of what the future is to look like, and it is compelling force of what the vision of that vision that drives us to speak and take action amid seemingly insurmountable odds and certain blowbacks from those who want to keep us where we've always been. But we're called to actions, not results. You are not called to conduct the whole orchestra. You are called to play the doggone cello to the utmost of your ability and only for as long as you feel inspired to do so, until the universe asks you to start playing the timpani. We simply are not called to produce results. We cannot control results, only actions. If there's one thing my most successful business, artists, military, and sports clients have confirmed over the decades, it's how elusive results are. Control is an illusion. This is where a lot of people go off course. See, this is where it is necessary to stay tuned in to the calling and the whispering of your soul, for it is so easy to slip into forcing action and forcing the results we have envisioned in our head and want so badly, rather than taking only inspired action. To live in concert with your own soul means to attack life when inspired, but also to throttle back when not inspired and walk away when the call feels done. And ceasing to act when not inspired is no easy feat. In fact, in our culture, to not act, to not be in constant motion, and to frenetic activity is to be considered a fool, at least if you wish to be seen as driven and actually living a life of purpose. We are called to actions, not results. The person who most runs from letting go of the results, who most runs from quitting, who most runs from the inner voice when it stops inspiring this course of action, is the person who most craves control. And letting go of control is monstrously difficult for many. This person fears the insecurity of not knowing what's next, as well as the agitation of not having something to do. But sometimes Life calls us from doing to just being. And when you are a doer, just being is hard as heck. When things outside of me aren't in control, and just so, I feel out of control and highly anxious inside. This person fears what people will say when they see she has not finished it the way she said she was going to. This person made a resolution decades ago that they would keep everything under control, read just perfect, so that there is no room for anyone to criticize her on anything, which is her greatest fear, as is the anxiety when things aren't perfect. To not control every last detail and every last result is to put herself in the crosshairs for someone she believes will take aim at her and hurt her, just as they did when she was a child. And so, this person forces all manner of actions, even when they are not inspired actions. This person tries to force the vision, and we just don't have the ability to force something that is not in the cards, written by the gods, luck, the universe, God, or just one of our own soul. Further, forcing action when not inspired not only rarely yields greater results, it often screws everything up more. Salespeople, business people, handyman, athletes, musicians, military tacticians, artists all know what I mean when I bring up the notion of forcing action. We've all tried to make something happen when it just wasn't flowing. But we don't trust that field, do we? We force our way through it. And that's the mistake. That's where the greatest room for spiritual growth is for a great many people. It is predicated on the notion that the universe or God can't be trusted, and that's a bold statement to make. Either you trust that God is speaking through that inner voice, or you don't. Either you fully go on your intuition, or your claims of trusting my gut are bullshit. But if you do trust it, that means always being in tune to it, even when it's telling you to pull back when you so want to keep surging forward, attacking. It can be tremendously frustrating to have to pull up when you are in mid attack. But as with Louisa in an earlier chapter, we learned to trust that inner voice more and more after going down the paths of not listening to it, after not trusting it. Incessant attacking comes from being married to results rather than simply being married to actions or callings. As much as you want particular results, you seldom get them exactly the way you've imagined them. No, the universe has a way of getting the best out of us by getting us off the path we have envisioned, the path that innately drew us to action, and that breeds results that are better, albeit very different, than those we imagined. This is one of the ironies of the spiritual journey. The vision and dream that get you going are seldom the vision and dream that you are called to for the long haul. I saw this in my years of work in the field of marital infidelity. The person we cheat on our spouses with is often the person put in our path to compel us to leave an already dead relationship, but it is almost never the person you later end up with for any period of time. Or the dream you have for your new career, the one that innately strengthens you to leave what has become a dead end, lifeless job. It is not always the one you end up in, because you discover that as you grow and change more, your tastes, influences, passions, and callings change too. And as I said, this can be tremendously frustrating if you're not expecting it, or if you're overly clinging to the initial dream. That's there's that great line from the rock group 38 Special that goes, "Hold on loosely, but don't let go. If you cling on tightly, you're going to lose control." That really sums up the third stage of the spiritual journey so well. Hold on to the vision that animates you and gets you out of bed in the morning, ready to attack, but simultaneously let it go each day too. Be prepared to walk away from it when the action is no longer inspired, for you are called to actions, not results. The gods have plans that we cannot know, and when we fail to give them room to work their magic, we come up with the results far less than what they could have been. There is a spirit and energy to life that we cannot control, that exceeds us. And the nature of the spiritual life is both acknowledging and giving room to, not to mention trusting that spirit of life that is unseen and uncontrollable. The highest order of creation and the true master level step of co creators and those on the spiritual journey is to let go of that which we feel called. The final order of creation is pulse, thought, word, deed, release. Pulse, thought, word, deed, release. Pulse. Dot, dot, dot. To simultaneously hold on and let go of is no small feat. It is this notion of releasing control and the need for specific outcomes that is a stumbling block for a great many people who desire to live freer and more alive. It is so hard to let go of control of life. Further, it is so hard to set your vision on one thing and also tell others this is your vision, and then let go of that vision when it is not accomplished. We so fear looking stupid, and we define unpredictability or even just change as stupid. So people cleave to security and consistency, even as they engender increasing boredom. We also fear looking stupid and being criticized for it that we'll continue all manners of garbage just to avoid it. To move on to a new call or to walk away from a course of action absolutely demands the willingness to look foolish. And most control freaks, which is a whole lot of folk, at least when it comes to their image, in one way or another, loathe the idea of looking foolish, because the scorn and ridicule are too much. They remind us of the when we were ridiculed or criticized as children, when we tried something new or gave expression to our real self rising up from within. And that's just a pain too great to bear for most. The simple truth of the spiritual path is that one call morphs into a new calling. Back in my late 20s, while simultaneously working my way through seminary, I possessed a powerful desire to have a speaking career. The greatest joy I could have imagined was to be a paid traveling public speaker. I was good at it, loved it, and believed I packed a good punch. I had even created opportunities for this to happen, and certain opportunities fell in my lap. I lectured at the graduate level, university level, and to several small and large spiritual groups and organizations, not to mention sports teams. Then I met a guy at a picnic who spoke for a living in a real estate field. One offhand comment by him forever changed the arc of my life and career, introducing me to my next life calling, one that would run concurrent with the speaking, counseling, and pursuit of ministry. He said that if I want a speaking career, I had to have multipliers, tapes and books to sell that enabled me to be in more than one place at a time. The light bulb went on. His recommendation was more than that. It resonated deep inside of me as my own truth, my own next calling, and for far greater reasons than just making multipliers. It felt bigger than that. So I started writing for publication, and I had been journaling since I was 13 and knew how to express myself, but I had never even considered real writing. Articles got published, 2 books got started. 5 years later, the book that put me on the map, naming and presaging the rise of the spiritual but not religious movement, was published, and my writing took off. The breadth of my impact expanded greatly. Interestingly, I had more speaking gigs, more lecturing at colleges in more fields, from sports psychology to spirituality, from general fitness to the sociology of religion in America, as well as speaking to police departments, youth groups, churches, and companies. I got fired from or lost ministry positions 3 times for supporting gay rights, long before it became fashionable to do so, and multiple times for radical theology mixed with what was seen as personality that was too intense. Thus, while the original calls inside of me were to ordained ministry as a Lutheran pastor and emergency room chaplain, and an additional career as a traveling speaker, they morphed into a very strong calling to write and counsel, which is the bulk of my work today, 25 years later. Even though I still speak and all of my work is spiritual leadership, it is just not within organized religion anymore. The point? One call leads to the next, sometimes faster than we might like. In fact, I used to tell people when I was a pastor that we so often feel we're waiting on God to give us our next calling or mission, the old Kairos or Chronos sermon. But the problem is seldom that God's not speaking the next call fast enough, but that the call is too scary or not what we imagined or wanted. Or God is calling for action over there in that area of your life when you want answers and action in that part of your life over here. So we hold out for another one. God's calls are usually pretty obvious, clear, and quick. Oh, and fear-inducing, not slow and comfortable. But we miss or avoid them because they ain't what we want or the fallout or price is too high. We claim to want a high and noble calling, but chafe when we get one that means walking counter to the path that is expected of us. On the spiritual journey, you will be called in new directions. And if the new direction does not simultaneously excite you and scare the daylights out of you, it's not your call. If it's safe, it's not your call. If you're doing what you think you should do, what someone else wants you to do, or what's safe and within your comfort zone, the call from God or the universe or your own soul is scary and invigorating. It gives energy. It inspires. It does not take your energy or drain you. Sure, there are bad days, but even on its worst day, even though there are occasional drops in the stock of your true calling always trends forward and up. All of this requires the courage to quit that which feels forced and simply no longer you. Looping back, the 3 steps of the spiritual journey are a constant loop. We are constantly overlaying one step onto the next. I may be in step 3 career-wise, but I'm in step 1 when it comes to discerning if we should have another child. Or perhaps I'm still into step 2 regarding standing up to my parents, but I'm in step 3 regarding trying to sell the house. We are constantly feeling, attacking, and quitting in different areas of life. This is what it means to live in communion with the soul. This is what it means to live an inspired life. It means trusting that inspiration. It means trusting that no matter what happens, I'll be okay. No matter what. To live an inspired, authentic, and ultimately an invigorating life of true aliveness means to live in trust of your own deepest intuition and fully acting on it when called, and not acting when not called or truly inspired to do so. To have that great relationship with your own self means to no longer care what others think, especially those who have been the most powerful voices in your life, and it means letting go of trying to control results. You are called. You must act. You must let go of the results. You must quit. You must quiet yourself and wait for the next call. You will be called to something new. You must act. You must let go. The challenge and joy is in literally moment to moment, hearing and following the energy from deep within, trusting that intuition, trusting the very whisper and pulse of the universe in you. There is simply no other life. Song recommendation. Listen to and dive into the song Hold On Loosely by 38 Special. The band is singing of love of a woman, but the words are so easily converted into the love of something you consider your baby. Perhaps it's a dream, a business, a career, a passion, your art, your child, your family, or something else that is massively important to you. One of the grand challenges of life is to simultaneously hold on to and let go of that which we want most. It is so easy to kill that which we most want by holding on too tightly. It is easy to spin ourselves in circles and tie our stomach up in knots by trying to seek control and force results, always limited to just one vision of what the ending must look like. The master of the spiritual life lives something different. It is to live in a state of trust, a state of letting go, a state of not needing exact, particular results in order to be happy. It's a monster challenge, but so gratifying when it is mastered or even endeavored. Bonus tracks. Core readers move on to the next chapter. Advanced readers check out these bonus tracks. Bonus track 7, The Dog and the Electric Fence. And bonus track 8, The Purpose of the Why.
How awesome is this? This is going to be the book we're going to be giving away. It is an autographed copy as well. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, share this out with your friends. At the end of the series, there will be a giveaway for a copy of your own book. Thank you.